You think you have high standards, that you're just selective, careful, intentional. But what if your standards aren't only about choosing the right people? What if they're also quietly helping you avoid being truly seen? You have standards, real ones, and you've held them long enough that they've started to feel like identity. You know what you deserve. You know what you won't accept. But here's the question no one asks, and the one that might quietly change everything. What if your standards aren't just about what you want? What if they're also about what you're afraid to feel? You've ended things before they fully began. Something was slightly off. The timing wasn't right. They didn't read enough. They weren't ambitious enough. They laughed too loudly, or not at all. And so, you walked, cleanly, logically, with a list of reasons that made complete sense in the part of your mind that doesn't feel. And the pattern continues. Person after person, connection after connection, each one failing some invisible inspection before it ever got deep enough to ask anything real of you. And somewhere, in the silence after, you tell yourself the same thing. I just haven't found the right one. But what if the standard itself is the point? What if the list was never meant to be fulfilled? Psychologists who study avoidant attachment have identified a pattern that shows up again and again in people with exceptionally high relational standards. The standards are real, but they serve a dual purpose. On the surface, they filter. Underneath, they protect. They create a threshold that almost no one can cross. Not because no one is worthy, but because crossing it would require you to be genuinely seen. And being genuinely seen is one of the most vulnerable things a human being can do. You are not too picky. You are deeply aware of what it costs to let someone all the way in. Here's what is happening inside the brain. The prefrontal cortex, your center for logic, planning, and rational evaluation, is extremely good at generating reasons. Give it a task. Find the flaw, build the case, justify the exit, and it will do so with quiet, elegant efficiency. Psychologists call this intellectualization, a defense mechanism where the mind uses rational thinking to create distance from emotional experience. When closeness begins to feel threatening, the brain doesn't always panic out loud. Sometimes it simply evaluates. It finds the flaw. It builds the case. It hands you a reason to leave that sounds nothing like fear. And underneath this process, research in attachment neuroscience suggests that the deeper brain, the limbic system, the amygdala, has already made its decision. Too close, too real, too risky. The standards arrive after, dressed as discernment, functioning as distance. So how do you begin to tell the difference between a genuine standard and a defended one? Here are 3 principles. Principle 1. Notice when the flaw appears. Timing reveals everything. Ask yourself honestly, when does the problem usually surface? If the flaw appears early, before real emotional exposure, it's likely a standard doing its job. But if it appears just as things are deepening, just as someone is seeing more of you, just as the connection begins to feel real, that's not discernment, that's the defense arriving right on time. Psychologists call this devaluation, the unconscious habit of finding fault in something that has become too emotionally significant to safely keep. Principle 2. Separate the checklist from the feeling. There are 2 things happening when you evaluate a connection. The checklist, clear, logical, easy to explain. And the feeling, harder to name, harder to ignore. Research on attachment styles shows that avoidantly attached individuals tend to rely heavily on the checklist and quietly dismiss the feeling. Not because they don't feel, but because the feeling is the door, and the door is what they're protecting. So the question to sit with is this: does this person actually fail my values, or do they simply make me feel something I don't yet know how to hold? Principle 3. Let one thing be imperfect. You don't have to dismantle your standards. Start smaller. Let one imperfection exist without turning it into a verdict. Let one awkward moment not become a reason to leave. This is what psychologists call a corrective emotional experience, staying through a small discomfort and discovering that nothing falls apart. Each time you stay when your instinct says leave and nothing terrible happens, your nervous system begins to update. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. Here's a way to think about it. Your standards are like architectural plans, carefully drawn, revised over years, every detail considered. But maybe they were never meant to find the perfect building. Maybe they were meant to stay on the table, because as long as you're planning, as long as the ideal stays somewhere out there, not yet real, you never have to begin. You never have to build something that could one day fall apart. So the real question isn't, are your standards too high? The question is, are you ready to build? You are not broken for wanting the best. You are not shallow for having standards, but somewhere beneath them, beneath the list, the logic, and the quiet reasons to walk away, there is a part of you that wants to be known, fully, messily, without inspection. That version of you isn't asking you to lower the bar. It's asking you to look at it honestly and ask, just once, is this a standard, or is this a door I built to stay closed? The answer may feel uncomfortable, but it may also be the most honest thing you've allowed yourself to feel in a very long time.